All right, let's talk about what it really means to think like a senior exec when it comes to finance. It's not just about staring at spreadsheets. It's about something much more powerful. Using those numbers to tell a really compelling story about where your company is and, more importantly, where it's going.
So let me ask you this, right off the bat. Can you jump from the nitty-gritty, down-in-the-weeds operational details straight into a high-level strategic conversation with your board without missing a beat? Because honestly, mastering that switch, that's the real game for any top leader. See, at that top level, finance stops being just math. It really becomes a language. It's all about, and this is the key phrase, mastering the language of enterprise value creation. And look, this is the language you use to communicate the health, the potential, and the actual worth of your business to the people who can make or break it.
So, if we're going to learn this language, where do we start? Well, you start at the beginning, right? With the absolute foundation of it all.
And that foundation is the profit and loss statement. You'll hear it called the P&L. Honestly, the best way to think about it is like a report card for your business. It covers a specific time, say a quarter or a year, and it's super straightforward. It just tells you what money came in, what money went out, and what you had left at the end.
But don't be fooled by its simplicity. A P&L is way more than just a list of numbers. It's the actual blueprint of your business. It shows you how all the pieces fit together. Your revenue, your costs, your margins. And this is the important part. It points you directly to the levers you can pull. The things you can actually do to either spark growth or become way more efficient. Okay, so the P&L gives us the full map. That's great. But you know how sometimes a map can have too much detail? So much that it kind of distracts you from the main road? We need a way to zoom in to get a cleaner, sharper picture. Because the P&L has everything in it, and that can sometimes muddy the waters. It forces us to ask a really important question. If you strip away all the accounting rules and financing choices, is the core engine of your business actually profitable?
And that is exactly where EBITDA comes in. It's a mouthful, I know. Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. But its whole purpose is just to give you a really clear view of how your core business operations are performing. It's why it's so incredibly important when people start talking about valuations or M&A.
So think about it like this. Net profit, that's the classic bottom line you always hear about, right? It's what's left after every single expense is paid. EBITDA, on the other hand, intentionally strips out things that aren't core to the day-to-day business, like interest payments or taxes, and also non-cash expenses like depreciation. What you're left with is a much cleaner look at the pure cash-generating power of the business itself.
Okay, so now we get it. We understand our core profitability. But just knowing something doesn't do any good. The real question is, how do we use that knowledge to make smart bets on the future?
And that brings us to capital allocation. Look, every single company has a limited amount of money, time, and talent. Capital allocation is the high-stakes process of deciding where to put those precious resources. Are you going to invest in R&D, a new market, maybe buy another company? It's all about getting the biggest possible bang for your buck.
Now this gets dialed up to 11 in high-growth companies, especially the ones with venture capital funding. In that kind of super high-pressure world, your very survival often comes down to just two tightly connected numbers.
And those two numbers are burn and runway. It's pretty simple. Burn is just how much cash you're losing every month, and runway is the direct result of that. It's how many months you have left until the bank account hits zero. It's basically your company's countdown clock. It's easy to visualize. You start with this big pile of cash reserves. Every month, your burn rate takes a chunk out of it. And the number of chunks you can take out before it's all gone, well, that's your runway. And if that runway starts to look short, it forces some really tough conversations. You either have to cut costs, go out and raise more money, or change your strategy. And you have to do it fast.
So we've talked about the big picture, investing, surviving. Now let's zoom all the way in, to the tiny details, the mechanics that decide if your growth is actually built to last.
This is the million-dollar question, isn't it? For any fast-growing company, your revenue chart might be going up and to the right, and that feels amazing. But is that growth actually healthy? Or are you just spending more and more money to get each new customer, effectively digging yourself into a deeper hole?
To answer that, you have to understand unit economics. This is where we go from that 30,000-foot view of the P&L right down to ground level. We're going to analyze the profit on a single unit, and that unit could be one customer, one product sold, or even one transaction.
And here's why this is so critical. Unit economics tells you if your fundamental business model actually works.
Think about it. If you're losing $1 on every customer you sign up, then signing up 1 million more customers is a disaster. You're just losing money faster. Healthy unit economics is the absolute bedrock of scalable growth.
And we can get even smarter about this by using cohort analysis. It sounds complicated, but all it means is you group your customers by when they joined. So you have your January customers, your February customers, and so on. Then you watch them over time. Do they stick around? How much do they spend? This lets you calculate their lifetime value, or LTV, which ultimately proves whether your growth is the real deal or just a flash in the pan.
Okay, that was a lot. We've got the P&L, EBITDA, capital allocation, unit economics. But knowing the ingredients isn't enough. The final, and I'd argue most important executive skill, is knowing how to put them all together to cook the meal. Because, at the end of the day, the essence of CXO-level financial intelligence is integration. Knowing what each of these terms means in a vacuum is table stakes. The real magic, the real power, comes from weaving them together into one single coherent story about your business.
So how do you build that story? Well, you start with the solid discipline of the P&L. Then you bring in the operational clarity of EBITDA. You use that clarity to apply real rigor to how you invest your money. You back up those investments with the ground-level truth of your unit economics. And then finally, you tie it all together into one clear, powerful narrative.
And what's the whole point? The goal of mastering this language is to make absolutely certain that every single strategic decision your team makes is financially smart, based in operational reality, and tough enough to withstand any question an investor or board member could possibly throw at you.
So I'll just leave you with this one question to think about in your own organization. Is every major decision your team is making truly investor-ready?